This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Introducing Virtuo Up, the latest in a long line of innovation from Nespresso. It's innovation you can touch, sense, and taste in every single cup. With a 3-second start, easy open lever, and dedicated brew over ice button, it's even easier to enjoy your coffee your way. Sip for yourself. Shop Virtuo Up exclusively at Nespresso.com.
Just the tips.
Just the tips?
Stops those split ends, lickety-split. Look at those ends, they are amending.
Now that's what I call a happy ending.
Red Kit ABC Hair Bandage Balm.
Planning a wedding shouldn't feel overwhelming. The Knot brings everything together in one place. Vendors who get your vibe, a custom planning checklist, guest list tools, and a free wedding website that syncs with it all. So instead of juggling a dozen apps and spreadsheets, you can actually enjoy getting married. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
Welcome to Unscripted. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige.
And we're talking about Natalie Wood today. She grew up on camera, became a Hollywood icon. Her career was brilliant. She was in some of the most well-known films ever. Rebel Without a Cause, anyone? And her life was complicated. But probably the most complicated, or the part that raises the most questions, is her death. And we're going to touch on pretty much everything from her early career to her love life to what actually happened. So let's talk Natalie Wood.
What happened to Natalie Wood is something I think about all the time. And unfortunately, there are theories, but that is all we are left with this beautiful life that ended tragically and mysteriously, and living people who were there when it happened that seemed to just kind of not, I don't want to sound rude, but they kind of just don't give us much. Like they kind of just don't know, ? You kind of feel like somebody's got to know something.
I mean, and there were people there on the boat, 3 other people, but apparently at least 2 of them don't really know what happened. And then the boat captain came out years and years later to capitalize on the murder, write a book and say his theory. So who truly knows?
No one.
No one
We
except
don't.
Natalie and the ocean.
Not even her children. And that is one of the things that I know eats us both up the most. I do want to add a little personal anecdote here that has a little bit to do with Natalie Wood. One of the most beautiful compliments that I've ever gotten, and this is without sounding too cocky, and I told you before recording I wanted to tell you something without sounding too cocky, but let me know if I sound like an a-hole. But this compliment just meant so much to me, and my mom was present for this compliment. And this is a family friend many years ago now, okay? I was in my prime. His compliment to me in front of my mother was, you know, Paige, your friend, the one that I had with me, is beautiful, but you, dear, are, and this was said more in like a loving way, not a creepy way, I promise.
I'm like, how old is this family friend that just said that?
It sounds creepy as you explain it when people don't, you know what I mean? Like relationships is a lot. But so it wasn't necessarily in a creepy way. Was it kind of out of the blue to me? Sure. But my mom's right next to me. You know, it was not meant in that way. But he says, but you are like Natalie Wood. Beautiful. And I was just like, what are you talking about? But that compliment meant so much because she truly is one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. In case we clip this moment, I would like to show you what I looked like at the time because it was the prime. Because now people are like looking at like, you know, a 30-something with a double chin. This is what I looked like at the time. Okay. So like, you know, I was confident enough in my appearance, but I was like, wow, what a compliment. And you're full of doo-doo. But
well, that honestly, that is a very sweet compliment. And I could see where it would come from. A lot of the same coloring, a cute little nose.
I think it speaks more to her level of beauty, Natalie was, even as opposed to me looking like, because it wasn't to me as, oh, you look like her. It was just, that's how beautiful Natalie was, that people all these years after her death, probably 30 years or so after her death, are saying to a young woman to give her a compliment, you are as beautiful as Natalie Wood was. Don't feel less than your friend. And I didn't even say anything less than my friend. But this friend happens to get any dude she wants. So I was like, dude, you're freaking full of it. And I promise you, he's not hitting on me. I grew up with his daughters. I mean, not her. I grew up with this man's daughters. Nothing was ever creepy. It was in front of my mom. But yeah. But now I'm just like lingering on this and it's getting too long. So we can move on. And that was not to be cocky. But I mean, again, it just expresses how beautiful Natalie Wood really was. And she was so much more than just her beauty, though.
That's what I was going to tie in, is that one of the things that people remember, obviously, is her looks. She was a very stunning person. But I did watch one of the more recent documentaries done on her life, and the family was heavily involved. And as a result, we got to see a side of her in the documentary. I think it's like Natalie Wood, What Remains, or like something like that.
Yes, that's the one that I watched
on
as
HBO
well.
Max.
There are a few out there, and much like the book you were referencing, they sort of are just like capitalizing on the mystery of it all. And that's why I was so excited to watch this one. Again, her daughters are involved. Her daughters, Natasha and Courtney. Her stepdaughter's involved. The love of her life, Robert Wagner, was involved. And this is obviously, I don't want to excuse any other relationships she has or anything, but you know, she and Robert married when she was quite young because they met when she was 10 and she noticed him, but he wasn't thinking about her that way. And though later on, when she was 18, they had their first date and then got married in like 57 and then divorced, but they found each other again. And I love that story. Not just that it really just shows, you know, they were married for like 5 years, divorced for 10 and remarried. Their love was real. And the whole story behind that, which maybe it'll come up a little bit deeper later, but the whole story behind that is really what fascinated me partly with this documentary. It's so beautifully told. Their love story, Robert's and Natalie's.
I mean, we're not doing a deep dive on that specific documentary, so I just want to be clear on that. But the reason I brought it up is because, you know, a lot of people talk about her appearance. A lot of people talk about the public-facing persona of the person they believed Natalie was, but we got to see a deeper side to who she was. And I'm glad you brought up her relationship with Robert Wagner and touched on it a little bit. We're going to go into that a little bit deeper later on, but we also got to see what she was like as a mother and how she treasured that role in her life and perhaps considered it her greatest role. And so she was this multifaceted individual that had a lot of layers to her. And I'm excited to go and explore every little layer. So what better way to get to know Natalie than to start from the very beginning? And I think probably something that a lot of people don't realize is that Natalie Wood wasn't her birth name. She was born Natasha Zakharenko. And she was born in San Francisco, July 20th, 1938. And she was of Russian and Ukrainian descent. Her parents were Russian immigrants. They were Russian Orthodox. She had an older sister who was like 10 years older than her, and then a younger sister as well. I think her younger sister's name is Lana, who she will come up later on.
So Natalie's name actually came from a nickname in Russia for Natasha is oftentimes Natalie. So that's why they chose that name as she was becoming a child actor. And then Wood came from, I believe, some kind of director. Her father chose Wood for a reason such as that. Somebody involved in their life at the time, but that was in the industry as well.
I actually believe it was an executive. So
an executive.
Yes, a film executive. So like I mentioned, she was born Natasha Zakharenko, but when her family immigrated to the US and a couple years later, because that name was so hard to pronounce, her family changed their surname to Gerdine. And then when she eventually became involved in film, a lot of the executives were like, Natasha's Gerdine, that's not what we want. So,
and it is kind of a mouthful. And who cares? A name is a name. But I could see where
the executives cared. So,
especially back then, there wasn't as much appreciation fostered for diversity of things like that, if that makes sense. It just needed to be very clean cut, very transatlantic.
And it was the studio system at the time, which I do talk about in one of the classes that I teach. We won't go too deep into like film history here, but it was the studio system, and they were known for making stars, you know, from their names to their looks to who they would date to who they would marry and have children, when they could have children, what films they would be in.
So of course they listened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, either that or you didn't have a job. But
That's
the
right.
last name Wood, was meant to be more appealing to English-speaking audiences, and it was a tribute to filmmaker Sam Wood.
I feel like that is such an interesting choice to go with the last name of somebody else in the industry. And it does, you know, to me, bear the question of why Sam? Were they close with Sam Wood? Were they just an appreciation of him and wanted to go with a name that was doing really well? Like, it's all so interesting to me. And I do wonder today what, you know, that might look like, because we do have people, especially those that may have a name that's foreign to the US. People are rocking those names now, and we are, you know, saying them and appreciating them. So I wonder what would have happened.
I mean, and that's only pretty recent, because I think of Martin Sheen and his sons, who famously, one kept his birth name, Emilio Estevez. Versus Charlie Sheen, who adopted his father's, you know, celebrity name. And so we saw that even happening not too long ago.
Yeah, that's within, you know,
our
last
not
40
our lifetime,
years.
but maybe our parents' lifetime.
Yeah, in our lifetime, in the sense that these people were still big, you know, right? Like Emilio Estevez, he was in his 20s in the 80s, you know, and then in the 90s when he was in a lot of movies, as we were growing up, like we knew who they were, and they were going through those questions and changes and making those decisions. So back to Natalie, though.
Yes.
She started in the film industry, as we mentioned, so young. So she was born July 20th, 1938. We know I love a birthday. It really just sets me on the path of understanding somebody. And she was only 4 years old when her first movie was released, The Moon is Down, in 1943.
And her role was basically a little girl who drops an ice cream cone. And we did hear a little bit about how she was able to secure that role in that documentary that we watched. And I believe it was one of her daughters that talked about how Natalie's mother was intensely ambitious. And she believed that Natalie was meant to be a celebrity. She was meant to enter stardom. In fact, there was a story that said Natalie's mother was told by a gypsy that Natalie would become world famous, but she would die in dark water. And I think the mom took that to heart, because she's the one who pushed Natalie into talking to the executive, who would later cast her as this 4-year-old dropping the ice cream. And, you know, she did that role and kind of went on with her life. And maybe a year or two later, another role came up, and the filmmaker remembered working with her and reached back out. And that kind of got the ball rolling again with her career. And she didn't stop working for basically her entire life.
Her mom took this acting career very seriously, to the point where when they were filming another movie, Tomorrow is Forever, I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with all of the movies, especially from when she was young, besides Miracle on 34th
I was going to say, you know, there's got to be at least the one, her breakout role.
Especially from when she was young. But this movie, Tomorrow is Forever, she was supposed to cry in a scene. And I mean, this honestly kind of disturbs me. Her mother, because Natalie was struggling with crying on cue, ripped a butterfly to pieces right in front of her to make her cry. And that's so disturbing. But her mom was going to do what it took to, you know, help her daughter succeed. And it does seem like Natalie, you know, enjoyed what she was doing. I'm sure she had her moments. We all have our moments with everything. You know, all things we love, it doesn't mean, and it kind of trivializes it if you're super busy with it and it's all you ever do, right? But it does seem like she kind of loved her life throughout this career, which we were talking about Miracle on 34th Street, a big breakout role when she was just, what, like 7 years old?
Yeah, something around there.
Mhm.
And I think she did enjoy it. I don't think a child can give a performance like that unless they
Mhm.
are enjoying what they're doing. But it eventually came to a point where she became the only source of income for her family. And so she
Mhm.
had her parents and her older sister, her younger sister, and herself. So a family of 5 that she was supporting as a child. And so you can imagine the extreme amount of pressure that she was under. And given the relationship she had with her mother that was very complicated, you just mentioned what she did to a butterfly. You can imagine how she would treat her own child.
I feel like we hit this problem. I don't even want to say problem because I feel like that trivializes it. We hit this ethical boundary with children and child actors all the time. And it's just multi-generational, this idea of supporting the family. And it makes me so sad. There is a sense of pride, right? Of like, wow, we're so proud. And, we're also dedicating our lives to support this career that this child wants. But like, also, does an 8-year-old know that's what they really want? Do they understand those pressures? No, that's the whole reason why we delineate who's a minor, who's an adolescent, who's an adult. Like we delineate all of that, and adolescents are minors as well. But I'm just kind of showing the different like stages as well. Children, adolescents, adults, we delineate that for a reason.
You're so right in the fact that children don't realize like this
Mhm.
is what they want to do. I would say most. Maybe there are a few outliers out there that really want to do it and their family supports them, but their family is also having the adults bring home a paycheck and not relying on their child. But in her instance, as I mentioned, like she was the sole source of income, and the mom made sure that she understood the pressure and the expectations that were on her to secure roles. And there's this one story that I believe her older daughter shares. And it basically goes along the lines of Natalie had an audition. And when the audition was over, her mom told her, well, that didn't go very well. I guess we won't be getting your sister any shoes. We won't be able to afford shoes for your sister. She did eventually get the role. So the person who tells this story in the documentary does admit, like, well, I guess the sister did get her shoes. But that's the sort of pressures that the mom was putting on her at the time. So like maybe a normal 10-year-old wouldn't understand the expectations that were on her and the responsibilities. But it's clear that, she had a lot of stress and a lot of heavy lifting to do for her family.
When you hear comments like that, I mean, that there were more than just
yeah.
that one instance of the pressure, not only just being put on naturally to Natalie by supporting her family and again, what would have come naturally from that, but to like hear that from your mom. And when you're a kid, you don't always understand what is different about your life compared to others, especially the younger you are, the less you do. Like there's this thing where if you are sitting across from a child and you have, like, let's just say, stick with me, a clay mountain or volcano that's painted 2 different colors. Let's call it purple on one side and green on the other side. And you tell the child, draw what I see. What do I see? Talking about the person across from them. They will draw the mountain, volcano, or whatever, and they will color it the color that they see. Because it's so kind of hard to understand those different perspectives. They are not developed to that point at that moment. And this really starts to dissipate and change and evolve probably after like 8-ish. But all that to say, I mean, imagine going through that, but then thinking like, oh, that's the world, right? And you accept that and you learn that from such a young age.
Well, and I imagine creates this sense of fear of failure, right?
Right. You don't have a choice but to make it work because you're supporting your family. And again, this happens for so many child actors, I think, because a lot of families move for this career or all of these things. And it makes me think back to 13 when I started all of my, acting stuff from like 13 to like 18. And I was doing it for fun. My mom made me understand like, this is your sport. As long as you want to do it, that's okay. But like, imagine like putting the pressure on and being like, you need to get all these roles and you need to bring in this extra money. You're going to be going to college soon. That would have been awful. Like, I got lucky, but also didn't get lucky in my career because I'm a failed child actor. And I'm laughing because I absolutely did not do anything exciting, but I did have a lot of fun. So
I wonder how this impacted her adult life, because she's one of the few child actors who was able to transition out of child acting into adult roles. And clearly she honed her skill over the years. So like it didn't affect her career-wise, but I imagine it impacted her personal life. It had to have.
Oh, absolutely. I think it made her the mother she was, which her daughter, Natasha, I believe it could have been Courtney, but I think it was Natasha, talks about how like casual she was at home, kind of undone, relaxed, fun. Certainly not like, in pajamas all day, but she just means all of this makeup and all of the things she wore when she and Robert Wagner would go out for the evening, awards shows, dinner, dates. That's when she was done up and just like the rest of us. And so I think that maybe that did play a role because she wanted to be herself, her mom, stripped down when it came to home life. I also think that timing worked out in all of this too. So we see her as a kid, but she kind of almost immediately transitions into a fully teen role written for a teenager. And that only lasted 1 year. So timing was timing of her life, but also timing in that it wasn't super long, but people got this snapshot of, oh, here's Natalie Wood, the little girl from Miracle on 34th Street is now a teenager. She's in this show playing a teenager with these teenage related things. And then boom, we get Rebel Without a Cause in 1955.
And that was really the turning point for her career. Even though she was 16 at the time, she really showcased that she was an actor with chops. You know what I mean? She wasn't just this childhood star that had gotten a role. No, she could lay it all out on the screen.
Right.
If you've been thinking about starting a GLP-1 weight loss journey, Ro makes it simple. With Ro, you get 100% online care, access to clinically proven FDA-approved medications, side effect management, dosing support, and more. And best of all, it's all from home. Ro also offers the first FDA-approved GLP-1 pill for weight loss at the lowest cost around. It uses the same weight loss ingredient as the shot with comparable results, helping patients lose an average of 14% of their body weight within a year. That's one daily pill designed to reduce cravings and help you feel fuller. The pill starts at $149 for the first dose and $299 a month for higher doses, plus the Ro Body membership. Membership is $45 for your first month and $145 monthly after, and includes unlimited provider messaging. Ro also offers brand name FDA-approved GLP-1s at the lowest cost, whether you use insurance or pay cash. Eligible patients can start treatment in as little as a week. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Go to ro.co/diaries to see if you're eligible for the new GLP-1 pill on Ro. That's ro.co/diaries to get started on Ro. Go to ro.co/safety for box warning and full safety information about GLP-1 medications.
There's nothing that satisfies or hits home quite like home cooking. And HelloFresh makes it easier to do more of that this year. They have recipes that feel good and are always delicious. If you know me, you know I enjoy getting in the kitchen, but sometimes get a little bit too busy to do so. I'm sure that so many of you can relate, so I want to tell you that I have been turning to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I have turned to HelloFresh actually to help me pull my family together over meals that are simple and rewarding, again, on those busy weeknights. What's amazing is you get to choose from over 100 recipes every week that include cuisines from around the world. They even include 35 high protein recipes each week, which includes Mediterranean and GLP-1 friendly options. You get to feel great with wholesome ingredients like sustainably sourced seafood and 100% antibiotic and hormone-free chicken. When I tell you that the HelloFresh chicken is some of my favorite chicken, the best tasting chicken I've ever eaten, I really do mean it. Don't know what it is, but there is something extra special about it to me and my family. We love it. What else is really great about HelloFresh is that their recipes are often paired with seasonal produce like pears, apples, and asparagus. Listen, like I've said, I've turned to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I stand by it because when dinner tastes this good, nothing hits like home cooking. See what I'm talking about by going to hellofresh.com/diaries10fm to get 10 free meals plus a free Zwilling knife, which is a $144.99 value on your third box. Offers valid while supplies last. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan.
If you care about the seafood you eat, you need to know where it comes from. Wild Alaskan Company delivers 100% wild-caught, frozen right off the boat, perfectly portioned fish straight to your door, so you always know exactly where it comes from. That means no antibiotics, GMOs, or additives. Just clean, real fish that support healthy oceans and responsible fishing communities. Get seafood you can trust. Go to wildalaskan.com/wildpod for $35 off your first box of seafood today.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use, helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize, so you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Ready to refresh your wardrobe? Nordstrom has all the latest styles for spring, from elevated dresses and denim to standout tops and accessories. Discover the trends and essentials you'll reach for again and again. We've got brands you love like Wave, Princess Polly, Mango, Adidas, and Favorite Daughter. Plus free shipping, free returns, and quick order pickup make updating your closet effortless. Shop in stores at Nordstrom.com or download our app.
She was transitioning from effectively in this role from being a kid, teenager, to playing an ingenue next to a 24-year-old man, James Dean, by the way. Hello.
Yeah, she had a really raw, emotional performance. And this is the role that she was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. So we know that a lot of people saw that movie and realized, okay, Natalie Wood is something. It was really validating of that transition, basically.
I don't know if it would happen like that today. I say that a lot about a lot of things that we talk about, but I really don't know. I mean, this was just kind of seamless. The late, great Natalie may be like, oh no, this was very difficult and that was very difficult. And I'm sure it did not come without its moments, but I just don't know if it can be as seamless these days where you didn't come from, let's just call it like you're not a Nepo baby and you come from an immigrant family and then you're winning Best Supporting Actress. That is wild and not as heard of today. It just isn't. I think we celebrate it when it does still, but it really doesn't. And we still say that overnight successes are 10 years in the making. So in this way, this was 12 years since she had started acting, if you really do think about it. So maybe I'm wrong. She put in a lot of time by this point to win Best Supporting Actress.
And then about 3 years later, when she was 19 years old, she would eventually marry Robert Wagner, who we've been talking about, you know, a little bit here and there throughout this episode, but he really does play such a pivotal role in her life, career, and death, or at least he was present when it happened. And, you know, I didn't realize until we did research for this deep dive that they were married twice. So the first marriage that we touched on earlier was the one that happened when she was 19. And as you said, they met when she was a child and he was, I think he's about 8 years older than her. So she was 9 or 10 and he was a full-on adult.
They were 10 and 18 and she noticed him, but he didn't notice her like that. And there's a funny old interview about it where he goes, it would have saved me a lot of time, which is like, oh, you should have not said that, Rob.
But like at the time,
creepy.
it got a laugh.
It got a lot of laughs, and she kind of rolls her eyes because what he really means is, and what he probably should have said, well, no, actually, I'm not going to like clean this up for him. But what he should have said is, well, like, yeah, you were 10. So of course I didn't notice. But if I knew when you were 10 that when you were an adult, I would marry you, it would have saved me a lot of strife in my life kind of thing, which still borders on creepy. But you get what I'm trying to say, right? Because Rob just doesn't come off that way. But on her 18th birthday, that's what I was going to say,
bordering on creepy. He also did take her out on her 18th birthday for their first date. So,
but she was all about it. She looked at him when he was 18 and she told her mother, I'm going to marry him.
Mm-hmm. So she knew. And I think he eventually figured it out that, there was something there, but he only made it official when she was of age.
It made me think about growing up, all of the Jonathan Taylor Thomases, the Devon Sawas. JTT, that's right. And what it did really remind me of, from Natalie's side, obviously, as a little girl, it kind of reminded me of all of the Jonathan Taylor Thomases, the Devon Sawas, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, all of these like heartthrobs that 10-year-olds were going after. And by the time that they were big, the two youngest members of, for example, Backstreet Boys and NSYNC were 18 when they were big. And the rest of the guys were older than them. So these like 10-year-old girls are like crushing on these older dudes. And I think that's really, truly what it was on Natalie's side. And then, right. But once she turned 18, it almost seemed like that they were both kind of in on that idea, though. They must have like reconnected when she wasn't 18 yet. And then they waited till she was 18. So there's still that creepiness on the side of it. So I do not want to trivialize that. I'm just relating to Natalie as a 10-year-old girl crushing on an 18-year-old, that it does happen and it's probably still happening. Probably happened with One Direction most recently when I'm thinking about boy bands, So anyways.
Like you mentioned, they started dating right on her 18th birthday, and then they got married a year later when she was 19. So it really was a fast-paced relationship for them. Mm-hmm. And even though it was highly publicized, because here are these two big name celebrities getting married, very good looking people, it wasn't quite the fairy tale that a lot of people thought it was. And they ended up splitting up. And there are reports that the reason they split up is because she caught him having an extramarital affair with another man.
I'm literally doing a retake on this because my jaw was on the floor and Natalie was looking at me like, are you okay? Because I had not heard that. And that would be such an intense moment for a marriage, any kind of extramarital affair. And I wonder if they left that out of the documentary on purpose, if Rob said not to put that in the documentary, because I know that wasn't the resource that you got that piece of information from, but there are 4 corroborating resources that you found about that. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Incredible meaning the amount of resources, not the information.
There's a lot of discourse about it online. And I think that perhaps the reason it wasn't included in the documentary is that it truly didn't stop them from reconnecting. Because as we learn, even though she had subsequent boyfriends, which included Warren Beatty, Michael Caine, even a broken engagement a couple years later to like this huge Venezuelan shoe manufacturer that was very, very wealthy, and then she eventually married Richard Gregson, who is referred to by their daughter as Daddy Gregson. They found their way back to each other because they were meant to be. They were each other's love of their lives. Or however you say it for like two people. They were the love of each other's lives. You know what I mean? So whatever happened to end the first marriage, it clearly wasn't enough to stop them from reuniting and getting back together and building this new relationship and family. And that's something I wanted to touch on, actually, because they remarried in 1972. And something I was thinking about when I was researching
This is 10 years later after the divorce, by the way. They were divorced for 10 years, had both remarried, like Natalie said, had both had their first children with their second partners. So here we are 10 years later.
And I was thinking about that as, we were researching and watching the documentary and, doing what we were doing to prepare for this episode. And I really believe that it was meant for them to have those children. And the only way that those children were going to be born is if they split up. And, you know, Robert Wagner got married. He adopted 2 sons from his first wife's previous marriage. And those sons maintained a relationship with him and Natalie until her death. So they played a pivotal role in their family unit. And then he had a daughter named Katie before he was married to Natalie the second time. She had a daughter named Natasha with Daddy Gregson. And then when they finally came together in 72, they got married and they had a daughter together. And I think they had to go out and explore and meet other people, have other relationships, have these children, and form this sort of Brady Bunch family unit. Like all of that had to happen for them to come back together.
Absolutely. I think that this is sort of a case of we're 8 years apart and you are very young when we get married, which wasn't unheard of back then. I'm not saying you can't get married young, but I think it was more of a case of that, maybe kind of some growing pains. Who knows? But the marriage had its issues. But yes, they found each other again 10 years later. And it was this beautifully blended family. We've got, you know, siblings from different parents. You know, I'll say half siblings, but, you know, a sibling is a sibling is a sibling.
And they're raised as full siblings, even though Katie was from Robert Wagner's previous relationship. She lived in the house with Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner, which you don't really hear of usually, the father getting full custody.
I love the story of when they got back together because it does feel so kismet, just like you were saying, like clearly, you know, everything that happened was supposed to happen, including them getting back together because they were both feeling, as it would take, the exact same way, but neither of them truly knew. They kind of reconnected at, I believe it was like a party of some kind of mutual friend or something. And Rob offers to take her home and just drop her off, not, you know, go back anywhere with her, nothing, no funny business. And he does that. And they both, as soon as they leave each other for the evening, Rob talks about it in the car after she left. And Natalie's daughter talks about this as soon as she shut that door. They both wound up sobbing because all of these old feelings came back and they didn't know that the other one was also feeling that. So it was sort of that like loneliness of feeling like, oh, wow, this was one of my greatest loves. I still feel that after this evening and I'm never going to get that back. Or I hope they feel the same way. Or would they do that? You know, all of those things. But they did both feel the same way. And they wound up together until the day that Natalie passed away. Should I say in Catalina Island, but in the water off Emerald Bay,
surrounding.
I believe. Yeah, right. Surrounding Catalina Island, which is a beautiful place, by the way, that they spent a lot of time with all of the children. I think there's pictures of Marion Marshall, Rob's second wife. I'm pretty sure there's pictures of her son on the boat, at least pictures of him with Robert. So, you know, this was a big family boat. They would go out there all the time.
I mean, it's even the area where Robert and Natalie honeymooned. This was such a sentimental place for them.
Very
they
special.
would go to Avalon. They would go to the Isthmus. They spent countless, you know, if you were to add up everything, years in the waters surrounding Catalina. And so it was not unusual for them to go out on their boat at any given time, whether it was good or not.
On a yacht, it should take from where they probably would have left. I'm thinking of the 2 spots they probably could have left from. Although with a yacht, it's probably a lot different than when you are someone who does not have a yacht. It probably only took a couple hours for them to get out there because you can get out to Catalina from LA and Orange County very quickly. So it is a really well-loved spot. And it was, as Natalie said, very, very special to them. So this dichotomy of a place that has so many happy memories for the family being where Natalie passed away, I think is so tragic and awful. And I hope that the family is able to also incorporate and remember those moments because they sure did a great job of including those in the documentary and the pictures and the stories and remembering certain things with a smile. But I can only imagine that going there would be extremely painful because not only did she pass away there, but she was found in water after she was seen as missing. She was then a little bit later on found. And I asked my mom, I called her and I said, Mom, we're talking about Natalie Wood today. She goes, oh my goodness. And I said, what? Sorry, Mom, I'm doing impressions of you on the podcast now. But I was really trying to get her perspective as the public, as the viewer. But she said people were bereft and people were worried. And I go, was it like a big thing, Mom, where like every time you turned the TV on and like news was actually on? Because remember, 1981 is when this happened. It was not a 24-hour news cycle, but yes, it was like all people were talking about and what the news was showing. And it was just a very big deal. And my mom reminded me that and also the documentary had done this too, but that they didn't find her right away. You know, they didn't find her till a little bit later after she'd already been seen as missing. And so it was just a horrific story that people were following of a beloved actress.
And to give a little context too, to these final moments that Natalie had.
And there's a lot.
There is a lot. There's so much that went into it. And I don't want to overlook them either, because we talked a lot about how I know you're going to think like, why am I going here? We talked a lot about how she was such a good mother. So when her and Robert Wagner were married for the second time, they were very selective of the projects they were choosing. They would only have one work at a time so that they were never both away from the home. Well, at this particular time, Natalie is 43 years old. She's really coming into her own with the projects that she's working on. And it turns out that this is probably the first time her and Robert are working at the same time. So they've been apart from one another. And that causes a little bit of tension in their relationship. They were this solid couple, not just as like husband and wife, but as parents. They really had been a solid pairing. But these tensions of being away from each other, of Natalie working with Christopher Walken, who we will later bring up in just a bit, caused some issues for them.
My mom brought that up too. And she goes, there was a lot of questioning when I talked to her about this episode. And Natalie Wood, there was a lot of questioning about whether or not there was an affair. And if Rob got mad, I said, Mom, don't talk about my Robert Wagner like that. And she goes, well, that's what people were wondering.
A lot of people wondered it. And in fact, I did notice that documentary that we talked about that we watched, they made it explicitly clear, because it did appear to be produced by the family, or at least the family was heavily involved. She did not have an affair with Christopher Walken, although Christopher Walken never appears in it and he never gives his side. But her close friends state that was not the case, despite a lot of rumors that swirled around about them.
And there can still be jealousy, without an affair. And that still could be. And what I told my mom also was, well, that also doesn't mean that like he killed her, but you think, she goes, no, that's why she wanted to get into that dinghy. She called it the dinghy. It's like this extra boat that maybe your boat's sinking and you need a boat to get into the water, or you probably use it when you anchor your boat to get onto land, whatever. It's one of those more like a small boat that's on the side for safety and lots of other things to this yacht. And she said that no, but she may have been trying to get away from them. And there was supposedly a lot of drinking going on. And I go, Mom, that would make sense why people, even though that they were there, might not remember things super clearly.
Yes.
On top of your memory can do a lot of weird things. You can even convince yourself something really did happen, etc. There's all kinds of, your mind can really play tricks on you. And so all that to say, like with drinking and any kind of drugs, or, the memories can be clouded.
Like the memories are clouded. The weather's cloudy. It was a very stormy Thanksgiving weekend of 1981. So the weather wasn't good. There were tensions on board the ship, which the group included Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and then the captain, Dennis Davern, or however you say his last name. And so you have a group of people that are intensely involved in arguments, whether it's because of an affair going on, whether it's just because of differences in opinions. Robert Wagner explains in his own words that he was mad at Christopher Walken because Christopher had said, hey, you can work too. You can be a mom, but you can also work. Because if you remember, I just mentioned Natalie and Robert Wagner would not work at the same time, but at this time they were. And so it created conflict in their marriage. Well, Christopher Walken, according to Robert, put his 2 cents in and said, Natalie, you can do this. And that infuriated Robert, who's her husband and somebody who she should be talking about it with.
I mean, valid.
But he yelled at Christopher Walken and was so heated and under the influence of alcohol. And there was suggestion of perhaps other substances, but he broke a glass bottle and threatened Christopher Walken with the glass bottle. And that's when the conversation or argument, I should call it, because you don't break a glass bottle and have a conversation.
No.
But it was inside of the boat, and then it went outside to the exterior of the boat, and Christopher Walken and Robert Wagner are having this intense fight while Natalie Wood is down in the bedroom. Well, when they retreat to their separate sides, I'm talking about the men, they retreat. Robert Wagner goes down to see Natalie and she's not there. So he starts looking for her, but it's a large boat, but it's not that large. There are only a few places to look. Where could she be? And he realizes, like you mentioned, the dinghy is gone. And so he alerts the other 2 men in the boat, this is his version, that Natalie's gone. And so they look for her and can't find her. I can't imagine how frightening that must have been in that moment, if that is truly the version of events that happened.
I believe that that version of events is our kind of broad timeline, right? And then there's pieces in the middle that are not coming together, which is why we don't 100% know exactly what happened. A little bit of context here. This yacht is around 55 to 60 feet. Pretty sizable yacht, but where could she possibly be? Also, for context, the area of Catalina that they were at this time is near this area called Twin Harbors. Also, the main area is called the Isthmus, and then I can never say that word right. And
Isthmus.
then it's the area that brings this Two Harbors town and area that's much more camp-oriented, wilderness-oriented, hike-oriented, and then it connects it to the more southern portion of the island, which is, the city is called Avalon. It's a little bit more like hip-hop happening, vacation, resort-oriented. This is when a lot of people say they went to Catalina for the day or whatever, or overnight. They're probably staying in Avalon. If they camped in Catalina, then they went to Twin Harbors. Also, fun anecdote, my school had a Catalina trip growing up. So I have been to the camp part. It is cool. It is beautiful. Lots of nature.
That must be like
Is it a SoCal rite of passage?
Yes, it is, because I did go there and we had a kayak and I cried the entire time because I just knew a shark was going to pop up out of the water, because when you're in a kayak, you're like 6 inches off the water.
I was so nervous for the trip too.
I stopped paddling. They had to tow me in. So embarrassing.
Oh, I don't know what I was thinking, but on my trip, I went as part of the strong swimmers snorkeling, which I did swim a lot growing up. But all that to say, it's a place that's very near and dear to a lot of Southern Californians. And so I really did want to give some context there of like where they kind of were. And they were kind of in the area that brings the wilderness to the more populated area. And I think that may also play a lot into, why it took them a moment to find the body and why things were so dark and foggy. And, obviously it takes a multifaceted storm to cause the things to happen like this to happen. And that's why we don't truly know what happened once Natalie got on that boat. Where was she going? Why was it leaving the boat and not going to a different area or room? What were these things that were happening that caused all this? And I don't know if we're going to know until some kind of deathbed confession, but
if at all,
Robert Wagner is pushing 90 years old. So he is getting up there. I'm not saying that he's going to pass, tomorrow. And so is Christopher Walken. So we may get some kind of deathbed information. That's the only thing I've ever thought about with this case. Is like, will we get that?
And at the time, after the initial search was done and she was found, I mean, we had like the Coast Guard involved. We had the LAPD involved. We had so many different departments that were involved in the investigation of her death. It was ruled by the LA coroner to be an accidental drowning. So that's initially what it was ruled, despite some bruising that was found on her body at the time. But family members like her sister Lana, who I mentioned would be mentioned earlier, she has been probably the most outspoken about how she believes and alleges that Natalie was terrified of water, dark water. She couldn't swim very well, and she would have never left the yacht on her own by herself to go on the dinghy and leave. And so she's been probably the most outspoken to say that she doesn't believe this was accidental. And then there have been reports of 2 witnesses who were on a nearby yacht as well that have stated that they heard a woman scream that night. So
that's right. The screams.
There are different things, different elements that we may never know. But I do know that in 2012, her death certificate was amended and the cause of death was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. And so this case is continuously in the news. Whether the family likes it or not, people are interested and people want to get to the bottom of what really happened. And like you said, will we ever know? I don't think so. Unless there is a deathbed confession.
We have to get some kind of deathbed information or confession. I think it's important to stay open to all options of what may have happened, because I know that it leaves out closure, but it also leaves the opportunity to eventually get that closure if we can actually get what happens.
And we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that about 5 years after the death certificate was amended in February of 2018, Robert Wagner was listed as a person of interest by police in this renewed investigation into the cause of death of Natalie. So do her daughters believe that Robert is responsible? No. And her daughters do acknowledge that they don't believe Robert has had any involvement in their mother's murder. So who's to say what really happened? But I don't feel like we could talk about her life, her career, her death, and then not acknowledge that the love of her life, whether he is responsible or not, has been at least looked at as a person of interest by police at one point or another.
I hope more closure does come. Her youngest daughter is only in her 50s. There's time, there's technology. There's just so much still to wonder about with this beautiful, larger-than-life actress. As always, thank you so much for being here. You can find us on social media at the Murder Diaries Pod. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube, and we will be back next Monday with another episode of Unscripted. Tomorrow, make sure you tune in to Docu-Files. And on Thursday, as always, we are covering a true crime case that needs your attention.
You can find us on socials at the Murder Diaries Pod. And until next time.
Bye.
If you've been thinking about starting a GLP-1 weight loss journey, Ro makes it simple. With Ro, you get 100% online care, access to clinically proven FDA-approved medications, side effect management, dosing support, and more. And best of all, it's all from home. Ro also offers the first FDA-approved GLP-1 pill for weight loss at the lowest cost around. It uses the same weight loss ingredient as the shot with comparable results, helping patients lose an average of 14% of their body weight within a year. That's one daily pill designed to reduce cravings and help you feel fuller. The pill starts at $149 for the first dose and $299 a month for higher doses, plus the Ro Body membership. Membership is $45 for your first month and $145 monthly after, and includes unlimited provider messaging. Ro also offers brand name FDA-approved GLP-1s at the lowest cost. Whether you use insurance or pay cash. Eligible patients can start treatment in as little as a week. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Go to ro.co/diaries to see if you're eligible for the new GLP-1 pill on Ro. That's ro.co/diaries to get started on Ro. Go to ro.co/safety for box warning and full safety information about GLP-1 medications.
There's nothing that satisfies or hits home quite like home cooking. And HelloFresh makes it easier to do more of that this year. They have recipes that feel good and are always delicious. If you know me, you know I enjoy getting in the kitchen, but sometimes get a little bit too busy to do so. I'm sure that so many of you can relate, so I want to tell you that I have been turning to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I have turned to HelloFresh actually to help me pull my family together over meals that are simple and rewarding, again, on those busy weeknights. What's amazing is you get to choose from over 100 recipes every week that include cuisines from around the world. They even include 35 high-protein recipes each week, which includes Mediterranean and GLP-1 friendly options. You get to feel great with wholesome ingredients like sustainably sourced seafood and 100% antibiotic and hormone-free chicken. When I tell you that the HelloFresh chicken is some of my favorite chicken, the best tasting chicken I've ever eaten, I really do mean it. Don't know what it is, but there is something extra special about it to me and my family. We love it. What else is really great about HelloFresh is that their recipes are often paired with seasonal produce like pears, apples, and asparagus. Listen, like I've said, I've turned to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I stand by it because when dinner tastes this good, nothing hits like home cooking. See what I'm talking about by going to HelloFresh.com/diaries10fm to get 10 free meals plus a free Zwilling knife, which is a $144.99 value on your third box. Offers valid while supplies last. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan.
This President's Day, upgrade the look of your home without breaking your budget. Save up to 50% site-wide on new window treatments at Blinds.com. Blinds.com makes it easy with free virtual consultations on your schedule and samples delivered to your door fast and free. With over 25 million windows covered and a 100% satisfaction guarantee, you can count on Blinds.com to deliver results you'll love.
Shop up to 50% off site-wide plus a free professional measure during the President's Day mega sale happening right now at Blinds.com. Terms apply.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now. You call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.